Blake, when you first heard this theme, did you think great, bad, indifferent, don't care?
I've always liked it. As a kid, I liked it. I thought it was very scary. As an adult, you question why did they go like this disco route? But it works.
Here comes Jason. Abel in the road. Shelly's tight ass pants. Rick gets no.
Hey, now we get to have the conversation. Who runs more like a sissy, Shelly or Ted from part 2?
You know, I started to pull that clip, Blake, but I thought it would be too repetitive.
Yeah,
because
that's just you noticing a pattern. It ain't you being repetitive. It's
let's talk about that real quick before we even get in the show.
Yeah,
who would you vote? I mean, because when Shelly takes off to the car, the arm style I think is more feminine than what Ted was doing. Ted had the high elbows, good running style. If you have breasts.
It's really hard to say it's more feminine than Ted, Ronnie. I mean,
okay, it's more like a feminine way to run because his arms were like flailing, almost like his ass cheeks were on fire.
Yeah, I agree.
So we're saying Shelly had the most feminine run.
The question is, who's the bigger?
Let's wait till we get into the actual review because I got a lot of things. I think when it comes down to it, Ted's like a manly man compared to Shelly.
Well, he does get some cooter.
Yeah, and Shelly's never getting any.
That's true.
Ever. Let's go to Higgins Haven. Or is it Havens Higgin? Yes?
Yeah.
All right. He's Blake. I'm Ronnie. All the good names are taken. Podcast. And we're back, Blake, third week in a row. And we're on to Higgins Haven. We're still
a little gimmick we started. Opening questions, Ronnie.
Yes.
How far is Higgins Haven from Crystal Lake Campsite? We talk about this all the time, but in your mind right now on the spot, what kind of mileage are we talking here?
Couple miles, couple of clicks.
Couple of clicks east?
Couple of clicks east. When we did this on the audio podcast, you bring up about there's no lake. And they had to like do a little man-made lake or something like that. But also we had people commenting in our Meatballs 2 review, Blake, that campsite was the same campsite that they did Friday the 13th Part 3 in. So I don't remember seeing a lake like that. And I don't even know if that information was accurate. There's no lake. Once upon a time, I want to say you told me it was like a little man-made lake they set up there. What I'm actually thinking I'm seeing out of this right here is this is probably a corner section of the lake where there's not very good access to get out there on the water. As you can see at the end, when Chris gets in the boat, there's a lot of like logs and stuff down everywhere.
Yeah, so it looks terrible. It looks trashy. And my issue, Ronnie, is the first movie, let's just say it cost $5 million to make. It made $30-40 million. You can call it a fluke. And then they make the second one, same thing, very low budget, and it makes $20-35 million. Why can't we put a little money into this? I'm not asking for an $8 million budget, but why can't we pay to go to an actual camp?
Well, yeah, you got to remember the mindset that was going on here. Paramount were using these Friday the 13th movies because they're really cheap to make and they produce a huge profit. They were actually ashamed that they were known as the Friday the 13th movie company when it should be all about putting out. You think Jason Blum is ashamed that he's putting out movies that cost $5 or $6 million and they make 80? No. And that's what Paramount should have embraced is we've got a horror franchise here that is making us tons of money. Instead, they were ashamed of it. They weren't going to put any money into these movies because they knew they didn't have to. They had a property that was making plenty of profit, so increase the budget a little bit each time, and hopefully the profit increases too. So, I mean, I really don't have an answer for that because good business sense, it would seem that, hey, let's put a little bit more money and we'll make more money.
And while I make that little small complaint, I like the setting of this movie.
Yes,
I do. And for years, I didn't realize it was Higgins Haven. I just always assumed this was Camp Crystal Lake. And I never really put that together as a kid, and now as an adult, I realize this doesn't have to be a campsite. This doesn't have to have that camp look. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to have all that. It needed a lake at least. I
Yeah.
mean, that is one thing. It doesn't have to have nice piers and open fields and stuff like that. I mean, this is a section where people can buy land and build a cabin. So yeah, I really like the setting. The barn is just so cool, man. It's a shame that this place was burnt down by idiots. Because now you can't go visit it, which you probably wouldn't be able to visit it now anyway by this point. But still,
Let's be real. The name of this, they could have made an alternate horror movie and named it The Barn.
yeah.
Because everybody gets killed in the barn of this movie, and
Everybody gets killed at the barn, and at Porky's, everybody gets laid.
But me and you love Friday the 13th. And at the end of part 2, now look, one thing I love about these movies is they do a hell of a job of recapping how the last movie ended. Part 2 did it, and now part 3 is letting you know what happened at the end of part 2, just in case you're one of these randos that showed up at the drive-in and don't know what happened in the last movie. Now you're caught up. And I like the way they retconned it, Blake, because part 2 ends with Wild Man Jason pulling Jenny out the window, and they retconned the beginning of this one to see that Jason's pulling the machete out of his arm and slowly dragging himself away. Okay. And if you want a real fun fact, y'all compare how Jason looks in Friday the 13th part 2 to how Bob Maluga looks in Big Man on Campus, and tell me Big Man on Campus didn't steal the look. But they retconned it so he drug himself away. So this movie starts off with Jason looking to get somewhere to get healed up. And it happens that he gets to the barn at Higgins Haven, which we find out later in the movie is a place that he's frequented in these woods, because him and Chris actually have some history that we'll talk about later. But he's just trying to recoup in these woods. And unfortunately for these people that show up, they pick this time to come to this house and actually hang out. So it's another example of the worst luck possible in this franchise. Whereas part 2, I wouldn't call it bad luck. I would just call it these guys shouldn't have went there. No, I don't know. I don't know. But I'm like you. I love this movie. This is one of those movies that we taped off of TBS or either AMC. It was movie edited, I mean, the TV edited version. So for the longest time, I didn't know Ali got his hand cut off. I didn't know that the girl that was in the hammock, the knife comes up through her chest, which is a really good kill that we'll talk about later. There was a lot of like theatrical cut things that I didn't remember because I grew up watching the same VHS tape.
How old are? What's the age range group that you're thinking here with this group of kids, Ronnie? Like, are we mid-20s?
I think we're early 20s. I think we're supposed to be early 20s. There's a possibility. Yes, these are early 20s. It has to be early 20s. Rick, it's the 80s. Rick could be anywhere from 24 years old to 44 years old.
Right.
Chuck and Chili. Chuck actually looks like he's Tommy Chong's age now in this movie, but I'm pretty sure he was probably really young and just looked old. There's tons of questions when we get into it, but this is a real solid installment in the franchise. And I got to say, Blake, I know you said it about part 2 when we reviewed that one. As I was making notes for the good, bad, and the ugly in this one, I had a lot of bad.
Yeah.
I had a lot of bad. I still enjoyed the movie. But breaking down the movie, I had a lot of bad. I don't even know if that makes sense because we try not to be negative, and we don't want to be negative. We love Friday the 13th. But as I was doing the outline, I'm like, holy crap, I don't even have but one good yet as I was marking the bad on this.
I completely understand what you're saying or what you're trying to say. I think you and I are doing a unique thing here with this franchise. We're going from movie to movie, and we're going into each movie with a fresh set of eyes, like we're going into it for the first time, and we're noticing things that we've never noticed our whole life, and it's changing how we feel about each movie, and it's really fun, and I mean it does help that this is mine and your favorite horror franchise. But my next question before we get into the good and the bad and the ugly is, where the hell does Rick live? And what's the situation with Chris's summer house? Because Rick is inside this house as they pull up. He's the one looking out the window.
Blake, there's a lot of questions about that. Why is he loading hay into the barn?
I get it why we show waist down Rick inside the house. It's supposed to be a fake out. You know, we're supposed to think that's Jason, but it's not. It's Rick. I don't understand.
He's wearing a, what's it called? Flannel shirt. He's wearing a flannel shirt that Jason was wearing in the last movie. I don't think it's that big of an issue, Blake, because we move into part 4 and we find another residential area. So there's a good possibility that Rick lives in one of the residential areas on Crystal Lake, and he just keeps up Chris's family's spring or summer home or lake house while they're away wherever they live.
Yeah,
there's a good possibility that that's happening.
And I think that's the most reasonable response. Is he's like he's kind of like a farmhand, and you're right. He keeps that place up, and that's how he does it, probably because he's in love with Chris.
Without a doubt, he's in love with this girl. He's trying to attack her as soon as she comes in. So Blake, without further ado, let's get into. You want to start with the good or the bad? You flipped the script last time. I'll let you pick again.
Can I start with the good?
Let's start with the good.
I know how you feel about certain actors, and I know how YouTube feels about certain people who portray Jason, but this portrayal of Jason by Richard is the best.
Edit.
What is it?
Edit. It's Richard Brooker, not Richard
Where'd I get from?
I don't know. Edit. It's not. It was never edit.
I could have swore when he busted out of that house, Ronnie, that was from YouTube.
Edit. It was not from YouTube. Edit.
Okay. Anyway, so back to what I was saying. This look of Jason, Richard Brooker, yeah, he's not the first person to portray Jason, but it feels like this is it, right? This feels like him walking around POV style, just like the second one, just watching these kids, just watching them and waiting for the right moment to strike. And when he puts that mask on and he walks out there and he shoots Vera and he tosses that gun down and then he turns around and takes those steps on the pier and looks up at the light like The Exorcist, like a scene out of The Exorcist. And then it cuts to 2 hobos hunching. It's just such a good thing. And there's another scene, Ronnie. I'm trying to remember. I think he comes through a window.
Yes.
He throws Rick through the window. Rick, where are you? And then he throws Rick through the window. When he comes through that window, he just looks so awesome. And like no one ever talks about how the green shirt is such a good look.
We can thank Harold for that. Because this movie starts off, Blake, and I want to ask this question. The movie starts off at this store. Is that the same place that Max, the mechanic, brings the truck at the very beginning of part 2? Because when Chris and the gang drive by, there's a slow decline down the hill to get to that store. And if you remember, Max goes down a hill to park whenever they're chasing the car before they run into Ted. Is that the same area or supposed to be the same area where that prank took place, or am I reading too much into it?
I don't think there is a wrong answer, but I didn't take it as it was the same place. I thought it was different. It looked more like townish in part 1 and part 2. And in this one, it looks like something, hey, there's nothing around this side of the lake. Let's set up a little everything shop. You can get fruit, you can get bait, you can get a little bit of everything. And
a snake.
A snake. You can watch somebody in the woods. Hearing his hit the water was
oh my God,
so good. And look, I'll be honest with you, Ronnie. I'm a sucker for I don't know what it is. I'm a sucker for scenes where guys just start eating. They're eating the product they're supposed to be selling. I think John Carpenter does it in The Fog. Don't he do it in The Fog in the beginning? Our boy Brian Bosworth does it in Stone Cold. He's in the grocery store eating. He's just eating a little bit of everything. And And then the mean old wife comes in there and says he's fat and he's supposed to be
Yeah.
losing weight, and he's not even that big. I bet he's not even 200 pounds.
He's movie fat. It doesn't count. Blake, believe it or not, that's one. I'm gonna anytime from here on out, because we're gonna have a lot of the same things. I'm just gonna go ahead and read mine off. You said the point of view, Jason. I have that. The Jason stalking is my first good. And they added a little bit to it from part 1 and part 2. And I get it. Miss Voorhees, part 1, Jason, part 2. It was in part 1, we just see what Mrs. Voorhees is seeing. In part 2, they add the little hand to touch the branches. In this one, they back it up a little bit, and you see it from the point of view of over Jason's shoulder or from the side of his waist. You actually see big body Jason there. And I thought that those shots, especially when it would show him, the barn slowly close, whenever Chris would look out there and just barely miss catching to see him, when he's closing the barn door, standing there with his arms crossed as they run off towards the lake to swim.
Well, Ronnie, don't forget about the scene you were mentioning, Harold and Edna. Don't forget about the scene when Edna looks out the window and you see Jason out there by the clothes. And, if you pause it, you get a really good look at him, but he walks by so fast in real time, she can't really tell who it is. And, that's when he's stealing some of Harold's clothes or whatever. But yeah, you get a really good look at him there. And that's a cool, creepy scene.
Yeah. Here's the thing, and this is a theory. I'm gonna hijack the show for a second. What was her name? Jenny and Paul in part 2. They pull the bag off of Jason. One of the biggest complaints about this franchise is how different Jason looks from movie to movie, and I get it. He went from skinny mountain man to this one. He's a big jacked up guy with some traps and stuff like that. And I know, Blake, we found the theory years ago that there's multiple mountain men out there in Crystal Lake Wilderness. There's a bunch of freaks out there that are committing murders, and everybody just assumes that's Jason. And I understand that that's just a theory because he responds to the name Jason in part 4. But what I'm getting at is at the end of part 2, they pull the bag off his head, and I think Paul goes, Jesus. And then at the end, he comes through the window and we get to see his face and his long hair and all that. But also, we're supposed to believe that never happened. So is that Jenny manifesting what she thought he looked like in part 2, and what he actually looks like is what we see in part 3? Like he's always been bald, and she manifested the long-haired weirdo mountain man. Is that a way is that something we can throw in there to clear up how Jason looks different from movie to movie, or am I doing too much to try to help these guys? Because from the outside looking in, you would go, guys, did y'all not see part 2? Dude's got long hair. What are y'all doing?
I mean, that's a really good theory, Ronnie, but I like to think that Jason just adapts and changes his look overnight. That way the police can't identify him.
That's even better. That is even better that he gets somewhere and he shaves his head. He shaves his head so he can't, because they're looking for a long-haired mountain man in overalls and flannel, and he changes into green shirt and corduroy pants. All right, Blake, what's your next good?
My next good, we talked about it during the intro, Ronnie, is going to be the score, the horror disco. It just works. It really does. It's spooky. They play it at the right times, and it's catchy. And I don't know, like you would, if you wrote it down on paper, hey, we're gonna do a disco remix of the Friday the 13th part. It sounds horrible. Like it sounds like a horrible idea, but it really works. And that's my good. Like I don't think they do it too much. They do it just right. It's perfect. It's right up there with John Carpenter's Halloween theme. For me.
There you go. That was actually the first good that I put down when the movie started. I've always had a fondness for the Friday 13th Part 3 theme. You just described it perfectly. It shouldn't work on any level, but it does work on every level, if that makes sense. It's really good.
Yeah, and let's point out, you got the original Friday 13th theme. Fantastic. You got this disco horror theme. Fantastic. In part 6, you got Man Behind the Mask. Fantastic. I mean, there's an argument that Friday the 13th, best horror music ever.
Oh, without a doubt. Blake, do you have any more goods? At this point, we're 2 in. I'm asking, do you have any more?
I got 2 more. You want me to go back to back?
I have actually 3 more. So
okay. Yeah, we'll split it up then. I keep waiting for you to disagree. I thought you'd disagree with the music.
No, dude, I love the music. I really do, and it's
Oh,
not.
I have three more, Ronnie. I have three more. This
Let's
next
see.
one is the
Let's see how many
3D.
we. Let's see how many we match up on. Okay, go
My
ahead.
next good is 3D. I enjoyed it. Now, I didn't get to live this. I never got to see it in 3D, but I don't think watching it normal it is that big of an issue. Like I would have loved to see this in 3D. And I've read a lot of reviews of exactly. Yeah. Booger cam. I've read a lot of reviews of people who got to see this in 3D, and they said it is phenomenal, and they understand why it caught on, and people wanted to go see it. Like it was a really cool deal. Like, there's some stupid stuff: the baseball bat pointing at us, Harold pointing the clothes stick at us, but and then juggling and like that. But like the fire poker, Jason reaching out for us, the eyeball, shooting the harpoon gun, harpoon well. Yeah, it's just a lot of good stuff, and it doesn't bother me that it's in there. Like when you talk about 3D movies in history, it's usually always met with negativity.
Yeah,
but this one is fun.
I could hammer 3D because I'm not a huge fan of 3D. The only 3D movie I've ever been to was the first Avatar, where they're plugging their or whatever that was into a tree.
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember people ran out to buy the 3D TVs, and I was like, I'm not buying it. It's a fad. It was a fad back in the 50s. It was a fad in the 80s, and it's going to be a fad in the 2000s.
Ronnie, no one has any television sets 3D.
It didn't bother me in this, and everybody always complains about the 3D scenes, but I'm like you, Blake. It doesn't take away from anything. It's good fun for the people that got to see it in 3D, and I agree 100% that it did not hurt this movie at all. My next good, Blake, Jason finally gets the mask. You touched on it earlier, but for the longest time, we don't get to see this guy until the very end. And in this movie, they take the step. He gets the hockey mask. He can now walk around and chase, and we see him all the time. He can lurk, and we see him. To say it's iconic would be overused, but it was the best thing they did in this franchise because the point of view stuff was starting to get old. All right. Even though I bragged about it, we both bragged about it earlier in this review, it's time to take the next step. There's a monster roaming around Crystal Lake. I want to see him walking around like the Bigfoot footage. So when they did that, it's like this movie did a 180 at the end. Now you can say what you want about this movie. You can say it's slow. You can say 95% of it takes place in a barn. But when he puts that freaking mask on, Blake, pedal to the metal, dude, the RPMs went red hot in this one. It got really, really good, really, really fast. So Jason putting on the mask.
I cannot believe that I left that off. That's such a good pick, Ronnie. And you're right. Best thing they've ever done in the franchise. And it was just pure coincidence. Crew member, one of the actors, whoever it was, brings their hockey gear, and there you go. History.
Think about how many things like that in horror were just an accident. Like here's Johnny in The Shining. The director originally didn't like that. It was Jack Nicholson. I mean,
yeah, getting tired from take after take, and he just improvised, and what's his ass didn't understand it.
Yeah. Okay, your next one.
The variety of characters. Ronnie, help me out. We watched the first two movies. Is this the most characters that we get to know at one and in the franchise so far? I mean, think about it. You got Chris, you got Debbie, you got Chuck, Chili, Rick, Fox, Loco, Ali, Vera, Shelly.
Blake, did you say Ali?
I did. Oh, he popped in on me.
Ali. It's so stupid, but it makes me laugh.
So the variety of characters. Now, do we get to know all of them? No, we don't. Even the strange biker gang, there's a little bit of heart with them. Like you hate them at first, and then you see that Fox nobody's going to get hurt, right? It's like, and Ali's like, baby, nobody's going to get hurt.
Baby, nobody's going to get hurt. Burn his barn down.
We're just going to steal their fuel and burn their barn down. And like, how do they find? Like, how do they find where they live? I mean, I don't know. I guess if you're out in that area, there's only one place you could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then you got Debbie, who's pregnant. Which, by the way, I don't think Jason gets credit for that extra kill, Ronnie.
Awful.
What? I'm being serious. Her and the gymnast are together. You got Chili and Chuck, or the stoners. I guess they're supposed to be comedy relief, and then you got Shelly, who probably is the most lovable prankster in the whole franchise, because everybody hates Ted.
Yeah.
And then I think in part 4, everybody hates Ted.
Yeah.
Part
5, everybody loves Junior and Ethel.
Yeah. So, yeah, you got Shelly, who's obsessed with horror movies, who is insecure because he's fat, he has curly hair, he has big ass, he's a virgin, he has a little he won't go skinny dipping.
It is.
And the whole rules about having sex, Shelly's a virgin, he gets his throat slit.
How come everybody hates Ted, but they love Shelly?
That's the only Shelly gets is on his neck.
Awful. Edit. Good one, though. Seriously, though, that's a legit question I'm asking you, Blake. How come everybody hates Ted in part 2, but they love Shelly? He is more annoying than Ted. And then let me preface all this. I like Shelly, but he is more annoying than Ted is.
He is. I mean, let's talk about this. You know how much I've hated Ted my whole life with a passion, but Shelly is the more annoying character, and I think horror fans relate to him more because he's walking around wearing a mask and a fake knife, and he buys all this fake shit. And I'm an actor. No, you're not. You're a loser. That's what you are.
How about?
Yeah, and he's fat. He's a fat virgin, so everybody relates to him.
How about the fact that Shelly's first prank foreshadowed the end of the movie? I mean, they're at the house not 5 minutes before they hear the greatest scream, and they go running up there, and he falls out of the closet, a hatchet buried into his head, which is how the movie ends, with Jason with an axe in his head. So he forced that. How about it? It blew your mind, didn't it?
He did, man.
My next good, Blake, is the kills.
That's my final good, Ronnie. The kills.
Not every kill is great, but once he gets that mask on, it's like a different movie, dude. He's throwing Chuck. That is one of the best scenes. When
a little
Chuck
more intense, right?
Yeah, when Chuck's trying to get the breaker thrown, and he throws that breaker, and Jason's just standing back there behind him, and then he grabs him and throws him into the breaker box and electrocutes him, and then he's upstairs, and he cuts gymnastics Scott Baio in half, and then he's underneath he gets underneath the hammock, and he kills Debbie up through the chest. I mean, I'm not even going to bring up the point. How did he get that half a body up on the ceiling with blood not everywhere? We don't care. Okay.
Well, no. I mean, how do you get under the hammock too? I mean,
he slid under there, slid in the DMs,
and
then
okay.
He's squishing Rick's head. He is chopping Ali up.
You don't think he could squish Rick's head? You're saying that's unrealistic, or are you just saying it's a great kill?
I'm saying it's a great kill. I don't care about the crazy 3D. It's the first time we see Jason. He does it a few more times in the franchise. Grab a head and smash somebody's skull. I think that's a really good kill.
Okay, so Ronnie, I'm going to give you some credit here. You brought up a fascinating argument with the Shelly and Ted.
Mm-hmm.
Let me bring up another one for you. How come Rob gets so much flack from part 4? How come Rob gets so much for jobbing out in part 4, but Rick don't get any in part 3? Like, he dies instantly. And like he's in like a half chicken wing, and he's having his mouth held shut so he can't scream like a girl. He would be screaming just like Rob would if his mouth wasn't being held shut. And then he gets his head squeezed.
Yeah, he leaves the cabin for 35 seconds before Jason snatches him up. He at least Rob runs down into danger and tries to find him before he starts getting hacked. I think it's the whole he's killing me, and we'll talk about this when we actually get to that part of the lake. I think it's the screaming of he's killing me that gets Rob all the shit that Rob gets, because he was supposed to be this big tough guy, and then all of a sudden he jobs out while he's screaming. Now, you're absolutely right. Rick, he's like SD Jones against King Kong Bundy. He jobs out very quickly.
It's over.
I mean, he leaves her alone and then goes outside and gets killed.
I mean, he's lifting up that hay with Chris on top of it, and I'm like, this is a big country boy.
Yeah.
Jason's going to have his hands full. He thought Paul and Jenny, was tough in the shack. Wait till Rick gets a hold of that ass. but we don't ever get to see it. We do get to see Rick's cool white Nikes that he's got on there with the blue swoosh. I like that.
My last one is Chris at the end of the movie. I didn't think much of Chris in this movie until the very end. I thought she was an annoying character. And then at the very end, once Rick dies, once she's in the danger zone and Jason throws Rick through that window, I mean, she gives that sad, Rick, help me. And then he gets thrown through the window. And like you said, an iconic shot of Jason coming up through the window staring at her. She's a badass. She takes it to Jason in a way that Jenny never took it to Jason. Now, everybody gives Jenny credit, but where's the credit for Chris, who dumps a bookshelf on Jason, stabs Jason in the knee and in the hand, she rolls his hands up in the window. She gets in the barn and she does like a high cross body from the top of the barn and drops down on him trying to hurt him. She hangs the motherfucker. She knocks him over the back and knocks him out. She wraps a damn rope around him and she hangs his ass. I mean, that's one of the coolest scenes in the movie. She hangs him and then she goes to leave and, he comes back alive and she sees she sees it's edit and she starts freaking out. And then she takes a damn axe to his head. She does more damage than possibly any final girl. Well, no, she does more damage to Jason and brings the fight to Jason more than any man or woman so far in this franchise. That was a battle between those two, Blake. She kicked it into gear. And now at the end of the movie, she's freaking psycho. They're taking her to the psych ward, but she is the most awesome final girl to date out of these three movies.
Yeah, a strong argument. Jenny's always a favorite, but what's wrong with Chris? She handles herself really well. My first bad, Ronnie, we kind of touched base on it a little bit earlier, is the continuity errors. How Jason looks, his size, you got all that. But one that really bothered me was the clothes he's wearing during Chris's flashback scene.
Yeah, it's the same clothes.
It's the same clothes that he just took from Harold's house, and this is supposedly 2 years earlier. It's come on, guys, what are we doing? Also, what effing day is it, Ronnie? I mean, what day is it? Let's talk about this out loud for a second. Friday the 13th, part 2, Friday the 13th. The next morning when Jenny's being loaded up in that ambulance, that's Saturday the 14th, right?
Yeah.
That night, Edna and Harold get killed. The next day, Sunday the 15th, Chris and them roll by, see the ambulance.
Do they ever say that it's Friday the 13th when Paul and them are there?
Do they mention it on the campfire, at the campfire?
I don't think so. I could be completely wrong. Leave it in the comments, guys, if I'm wrong. But I'm not sure that part 2 takes place on Friday the 13th. I think it's just part 1 that takes place on Friday the 13th so far, is what I'm saying. I mean, that I could be completely wrong, Blake, but I just don't ever recall them saying it's Friday the 13th in part 2. So let's get off the good and bad for a second. How awful is Harold's wife?
She's a horrible human being because she needs to understand that Harold's a catch and it's going to be the best that she can do. And she better appreciate what she's got. Instead, she's calling him fat. She won't let him in the house.
Why do they have an outhouse?
He's toting around rabbits and shit. And
dude,
is he eating fish food? Was he eating fish food in that one scene, or was it bird food?
We're segueing into my first bad. Harold's store. There's animals all over the place. It's a grocery store. There's damn rabbits all over the produce. He's eating out of everything. He's drinking out of orange juice and putting it back on the counter. It makes me never want to go to the store again. Also, it makes me want to work at a store because I didn't know you were allowed to do that. I'd be eating and drinking out of everything in Walmart if I worked there. But it's so gross. The fact that rabbits probably shitting all over the food. I go get a head of lettuce and there's rabbit all over it. There's a snake in there for some reason that he leaves the snake out. He just runs to take a I mean, there's a snake in the store somewhere. If I walk in there, I'm going to get bit. We need Bill from the first one to show up and cut his damn head off. That whole store is freaking disgusting. And Harold is the first person to start the trend of taking a shit in a Friday the 13th movie and then not wiping your ass when you get up.
Yeah.
Walk off.
Classic Friday the 13th. Hey, shit ass. Yeah, and Harold gets a meat cleaver to the chest. Really good death. I mean, I like what you said earlier. You know, we don't have we don't need Tom Savini anymore. I mean, right, guys? We're doing all right.
We're doing okay. We don't need We don't need somebody's head split in half every time somebody gets killed.
Right. We don't need you, sex machine. My next bad is, and actually, it's my last bad, Ronnie. So how about it?
Don't worry, I got plenty for you.
Fake Crazy Ralph.
That's one of mine.
You know how we feel about Crazy Ralph. He should have lived. He could have been laying in this road drunk as hell, and then he could have been in part 6. He could have been on that boat in part 8. He could have been there this whole time. You wrote him off, and it's not. I understand it's not the same people, but you wrote him off, and then you're going to bring another similar character back to do the same thing. Like, how many pieces of shit does this town have?
Yeah, how many bums are living out there in the woods?
He's laying in the middle of the road.
That was actually my second bad, too. Chris was going to run over him if Debbie hadn't have said something. She wasn't paying attention to the road. She was like me. Should have run right over his ass, and then the cops have to come out there. He's got an eyeball in his hand. He's supposed to be now he's a messenger from God. There were other parts of the body. People have this theory that he's friends with Jason in the woods. Jason don't have friends and people. If he would have wandered up to Jason would have packed his head into his ass. That's what would have happened. Yeah. So he's finding dead people in the woods, or either he found Jason's shack. Well, he couldn't have found Jason's shack because the police are all over Jason's shack. Okay.
Can we speculate whose eye it was, Ronnie?
It was Rick's.
No, Ronnie.
I don't know. Just probably a rando dead body out there that he just finds why do you keep the eye? Maybe he's the most psychotic person in the woods in this movie. He's walking around with a fucking eye in his hand.
Jason, his buddy Jason, told him to use it to warn the others. So he grabbed Paul's eye.
I knew there'd be others. Blake, can I derail, because that was my second bad as well. Can I derail our conversation? I pulled it up on my phone. So I brought it up in our part 2 review that there were 8 bodies found. Okay. Yeah. And I told you in part 3, that's what the news report says. Yeah. So a lot of Friday the 13th fans wonder what exactly happened with Chris and Jason in the woods. And there was supposed to be a sexual assault storyline in this movie where she was sexually assaulted by Jason in those woods when he found her when she was asleep. But the person that played Chris is like a Mormon or something like that. And she didn't want to curse in the movie or,
orgasm.
Or do anything like that. So she didn't let edit lay on top of her. Everybody says that everybody says that there's no way you should tie Jason into being a sexual predator as well.
Yeah, that's Myers territory.
You can't have it both ways. If Jason is some sadistic mountain man living in the woods, yes, there's going to be some sexual assault. He has no control over his emotions. Why would he drag Terry back to the cabin, guys? Because exactly, that's why he drugged Terry back to the cabin. I hate to burst your bubble, but all of your favorite franchise killers are perverts. Freddy, a pervert. Jason is a pervert. And you want to know why Michael Myers is breathing heavy in Halloween 78 when he's killing people? Because he's probably got a heart because he's a fucking pervert that gets off by killing kids.
He's a pervert just like you.
Just like you. So I bring this up for a point because I wanted to know exactly what the newscaster said. So I went to Reddit, okay? So bear with me or fast forward about 2 minutes if you don't want to hear this, people. The quiet little community of Crystal Lake was shocked today. Here's what people didn't get to hear, Blake. Reports of cannibalism and sexual mutilation are still unconfirmed at this hour. So they put that in there for a reason. Jason was going to be a sexual predator in this movie. Jason drugged Terry back in part 2, and he was molesting the bodies in his cabin. He molested Chris. And look, I'm glad they dropped that storyline, Blake. But for all the romanticism about Jason just wants to kill, you guys are living in a fairy tale world. All of these guys are perverts. They're killing because they're perverts, and it turns them on. Jason's is no different than a wild dog in the woods. He's going to hump whenever that lipstick comes out. So
he's going to have a big red
So I just wanted to bring that up, that the director was playing around with that idea. And I don't like that being and I know what I just said, but I don't like that being a central theme in a Friday the 13th movie. I like it better that Chris fell asleep out there after arguing with her parents and narrowly escaped being killed by Jason in the woods.
So Jason got caught with his pants down.
Exactly.
Hey, can we talk about how Rick is wearing Mrs. Voorhees' sweater at one point in this movie?
Dude, this is like the third movie in a row Voorhees' sweater gets worn. Paul's got Mrs. Voorhees' sweater on in part 2, and we never talked about it in that review. Go back and check it, guys. He's got a gray sweater on, too. My next bad.
Was that Rick that jumped out of the water at the end and grabbed her?
It was. My next bad, introducing a pregnant character to get killed.
You didn't like that?
I didn't like that at all, Blake. I don't know why you would do that. They killed poor old Rollerball in part 2. You would think a guy in a wheelchair would be safe. And then they come back with a chick in this one that's pregnant, and they make a point of saying she's pregnant, and pregnant people are usually safe in horror movies, and she suffers a brutal death. I don't want pregnant people being killed in my horror movies. I'm sorry. That's just my taste. If that's not your taste, I don't care. That's one of my bads in this movie. I didn't like the fact that they made a big point about her being pregnant.
I disagree, Ronnie. I don't care if it's snakes, you can kill it. I don't care if it's pregnant people, you can kill it. You're talking about somebody who turned down weed in the van and then later on in the movie said, grab me a beer, will you? So she doesn't care that she's pregnant. This baby was going to come out looking like a foot anyway. So Jason did everybody a favor, including the baby, including the fetus.
All pregnant people drank and smoked in the 80s, and everybody turned out fine.
So at the end of part 2, we get Paul miraculously coming back to help Jenny. Nice, good moment, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely not happened with Rick in this movie. But I loved that Ali came back, Ronnie. I thought that was such a cool thing. And I'm like, as I was watching it earlier, I was like, Ali is there to help Chris, to distract Jason, and Chris is going to hit him with the axe, and those two are going to leave together. It's going to be like a redemption arc for Ali. I mean, he was there just to steal their shit and burn their barn down, and now he's going to be the reason that they escape Crystal Lake. This is awesome. But they bring him back just to grab Jason's shoulder. And what's cool about this scene, Jason doesn't hesitate. He doesn't even look to see who grabbed him. He turns around and swings and slices his arm smooth off. And he doesn't take any chances this time.
No.
He smokes Ali until there's nothing left. And let me also bring up, before I hand it off to you, the very cool scene. There's an argument to be made after she hangs Jason. She climbs down. She could have just stayed in the barn. Jason had rigged that up to where nobody could get in. Now, could Jason throw a Molotov cocktail in there and burn it down? Yeah, and she had no way out. But Jason couldn't get in that barn after that. She opens up that barn, and he's sitting there swinging, and then he reveals that he's still alive, and then he messes with her, Ronnie. He plays mind games with her. He shows, hey, look, it's me, the guy from 2 years ago.
Edit.
She's done at this point, Ronnie. She's done. He's walking up to her. He's going to kill her. The movie's over. Ali saves the day.
My next bad is Shelly. And I particularly put Shelly's confidence, his behavior, his run style. There's no growth to this character at all in this movie. He starts the movie off as a silly prankster with no confidence. He ends the movie as a silly prankster with no confidence. He could have nailed Vera without a doubt, especially after the scene at the store. Was Vera going to pay with food stamps at the store? Because how racist was that lady behind the counter to see that she was Latino or Latina or Mexican, whatever it is? We don't take no food stamps. And then she wants Shelly's wallet. So she was going to pay with food stamps. And that would have been a great scene, because back in the 80s, food stamps was like this gigantic yellow and pink, purple money that people would, it wasn't like the debit card that you can conceal now. Like if you were on welfare back in the 80s, they like tried to humiliate you with the giant money. So we could have saw the big purple money. But that whole scene where he pusses out and then gets Rick's car destroyed and then runs over a little piece of a bike, that was the closest to growth that we saw. But when he gets back to the compound, he's still acting like an idiot. He's still coming up out of the water. I am personally a fan of the character just because I think it's interesting. But his character is worse than Ted. It's annoying, and he dies the boy who cried wolf death with his throat slit. I mean, but everybody always gives him a pass because he's the reason Jason got the mask. So that's my next bad is the actual character of Shelly.
I give him a pass for one reason, Ronnie. He has one line in this movie that changes everything and changes how I feel about him. Vera says, "I'm going to go outside and think about screwing you," or something along those lines.
That was what she said.
I mean, it was very similar. She walks out and Shelly goes, "Bitch." It is so great.
I thought you were going to say the line that like turned him for you is when they almost run over Abel. And he's like, "Don't touch him. You don't know where he's been."
No, I could care less about that. It's when he called Vera a bitch for not putting out.
How about, did Abel shit his pants? We did a video on that at one point. You can see the back of his pants. There's brown, wet stuff there. Blake, let's confirm it right now on this review. Abel, yes or no, did he shit his pants?
Ronnie, there's shit on his britches, and you gotta assume, from all vantage points that it came from Abel's ass.
My next one, Rick. What a perverted loser.
Yeah.
Chris is there not 10 seconds before he's grabbing her. And she's like, "What are you doing?" "There's only so many cold showers." She just got here, dude. And then, like you said, he's talking about sure things he could have had dates with. He immediately wants to leave after they destroy his car.
My poor car. Look, I've had it. I got to go.
And he's got the most truthful line of the movie when Shelly plays that prank. He's like, "Let's get the hell out of here." But then he goes, "Don't worry about it, Chris. He don't know any better. He's an effing idiot."
Oh, that battery died. I guess that's what happens when you leave the lights on for 4 days.
He's a loser. He might be a bigger loser than Shelly, but no, he can't be a bigger loser than Shelly. Rick served no purpose. I'm like you. I thought they were showing him pulling that hay up for a reason because he's strong. He's cock strong, and he's going to bring it to Jason with a bear hug, sort of like the dude did, the fat guy that played Flounder in Silent Rage. But he didn't. Instead, all he did was get the chicken wing Bob Backlund style, and he jobbed out to the Kona Crush. Total
classic
loser.
Moves. Total effing loser. Good hair, though.
My last bad. Mrs. Voorhees at the end of the movie.
Oh, it's a dream, Ronnie. It didn't really happen.
I know, but what are we doing? Do we got to have a jump scare at the end of every movie? You know what the original jump scare was, don't you?
Jason's sister? Brother?
No, originally, Jason had a different looking face. And if you look at it, you can't see it that well. But if you look at the outline of Jason's face, and I could be wrong, tell me in the comments, guys. But if you look at the outline of Jason's face when Edna looks out the window at the clothesline, and how dated is this movie? If you're a Southerner, the fact that you're seeing a clothesline out there is like a big deal because like everybody in the South used to do the clothesline. It's great.
We had one.
Yep. But if you look out there, his face is different than what it becomes at the end. They turned him into edit at the end, but his face was originally more like demon-like. And the original jump scare was he cut Chris's head off. He like comes out the front door, grabs Chris by the hair, and cuts her head off as the jump scare at the end of the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, you can look it up if you don't believe me. I may be wrong on some of the stuff, but there was an alternate ending where Chris gets her head cut off. I believe, Blake, there was also an alternate ending where Chris and Ali get away by running out of the barn.
Wow.
and leaving Jason in the barn after they hit him over the head with the axe. I could be wrong. I could be mixing up some stuff because I'm fresh off work to do this review. But there are a couple of alternate type endings out there of this movie that are pretty cool. And I'm going to tell you right now, after we get done with this review, Blake, when you look up that scene where he cuts Chris's head off, the appearance of Jason is so much better in that picture than what we got at the end of this movie. Yeah. I mean, you're going to wish you got that one. So that's my last bad is Mrs. Voorhees showing up at the very end and then Chris doing a pretty good job of acting like she's crazy. Hey, did you notice the crowd around Harold and Edna's store whenever they were loading up the bodies?
Yeah, I did. I thought that was really cool. And then we get a close up of Chris, looking at the ambulance. One thing I didn't like is you kind of know right away that Chris is the main character in this. In the first two, you really don't know who the main character is going to be, or not main character, but surviving character. And in this one, you pretty much figure it out right away.
Hey, you want a real good fun fact in this movie?
I don't. I do like at the end where Jason's laying in the barn. You keep thinking he's going to sit up or something, and he just lays there, and then the disco music starts. I really love that. What's the fun fact?
You can see Ollie's in his pants.
Now I got to rewatch it.
All you perverts, go.
Is it on the left side or right side?
Well, he's looking at me, so I think it's going to be his left side. If we're looking at the TV, it's going to be right. You can see his through his jeans, and it really sort of ruins the movie for me now because all I want to look at said.
Is that what Jason was hitting so many times the first time when it didn't kill him?
Yeah,
he's trying to cut. He's trying to cut through his.
He knew if he cut his off, he would lose so much blood that he wouldn't be able to continue on.
Let me ask you this: was that his arm that he cut off, or was that his at the end?
It might have been his. I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about before we go to our ugly, Blake?
No. I think we covered everything.
The chase scenes at the end, I know I brought it up earlier, but some of the coolest scenes in this movie is when she jumps in the van that they siphon the gas out of, and she stabbed him in the knee, and she's taking care of business, TCB like Elvis, and she drives off, and the van goes dead on the bridge, and you can see Jason in the background running towards the van. That is so creepy to me. Running Jason is so creepy to me in these movies. This is a really good movie. I know I just listed off a ton of bads, but this is a really good movie, and I really do like this movie, Blake. I don't think it's like the sharpest bunch of characters that they've ever put out there that you want to care about, but I think it gives us a real good final girl at the end of it that takes it, that has trauma in her life, and she takes it to Jason as like a redemption. And I really like this movie, and for the people kind of crap on it all the time for the 3D stuff, but I think over the years people are getting more and more attached to this movie and are giving it more credit than what they used to back in the day. Who is the ugliest person in this movie, Blake?
This was tough for me, Ronnie. I know I say that every time, every ugly. I'm going to go Loco from the biker gang.
I almost went with Loco, but I went to his IMDb, and if you cleaned him up a little bit, he is kind of good looking.
He's just so damn greasy.
Yeah,
he's smoking and right over the gas jug. It's hilarious. And then Ali dumps the cigarette at us.
I never noticed that Ali thumps the cigarette at the camera. You're right. He does. I was gonna go with Harold as my ugliest character because he's ugly. He was ugly and Married with Children when he was a big player on that one. I was going to go with Abel. I was going to go with Shelly because he's really ugly.
Yeah.
But I think I'm going to
even uglier now.
I'm going to go with Fox. I think Fox is the ugliest person in this. To me, this is my opinion. I think Fox is the ugliest person in this movie. She's disgusting looking. May have I don't know.
You were batting 1,000 with these uglies, man. In every movie, you were batting 1,000, but you missed on this one. She's a good looking chick.
I think she's ugly.
She's not uglier than Chili. Oh my God!
Well, I'm not gonna say anything.
There.
Well, I think she is uglier than Chili. She's got a weird look to her.
Yeah,
I think
Ronnie, it's called. Say it.
Edit. I think you're like just looking at her in hot pants and the leather jacket. If you look at her face, it looks like somebody took an iron to the front of her face. It looks bad.
She's Dollar General Pam Grier, right?
She is good value, great value, Pam Grier. She's ugly, dude. But I could have went with any of those. I'm trying to think outside the box for this. Harold's ugly. I know that. Shelly, I think Fox is ugly in this movie too. Ali could have done way better than Fox.
Cheech and Chong are ugly.
Cheech and Chong are ugly, but you probably could shave the beard. I mean, he's not ugly.
He's not ugly. Yeah.
He's smiling at us.
The cops at the end are ugly.
Yeah. I mean,
that one looks like Artie Lang does right now.
the cops at the end of the movie, like we see the cop do the Riggs and Murtaugh duo. We see them a couple of times throughout the movie, and it's really, you brought it up earlier, the way this movie ends is really creepy because you see them taking off, and obviously crazy Chris now they're seeing this massacre that has taken place, and then you got to take in account these same cops have been cleaning up this area, finding all these dead bodies, and now they find these fresh dead bodies, and it just goes to a zoom of these cops nearby. They're not even in the barn with him, but Jason with the axe buried into his head, dead in the barn. And just a real creepy way to end it. And if the series would have ended right there, that would have been pretty cool, Blake. I mean, because he's dead. He did some damage over a 2-movie span, but this movie made a ton of money, and they're going to continue on. Blake, we're going to get into the boat, and we're heading over to the residential section where the Jarvis property is for the next movie. Guys, hit us in the comments. What is your good, bad, and ugly? What do you disagree with that me and Blake have said throughout this interview? Am I completely off base with some of this stuff I'm saying? Just tell us your thoughts on this movie. We love hearing from you guys. That's about it, Blake. I don't really have anything else to say. Hot outside. I'm excited about part 4, Blake. I'm excited about 4. And I guess I should tell everybody really quickly, if part 4 is not out next week, don't let that surprise you. We may take a week or 2 off in between these next couple of reviews. All right, people. 3 Friday the 13th movies down. Only 100 more to go.
Yep.
For Blake, I'm Ronnie, and that's Ali. And we'll see you guys
at the lake.
Or at the lake? Yes, better. At the lake.
May I have the wallet, ma'am?